my question is, can this even be viewed as a trap game? Because you talked about it before. Michigan certainly is not going to overlook Michigan State because of what's happened in the time that Jim Harbaugh has been here, because of what happened in Michigan Stadium last year, even though the Wolverines had a pretty good time in taking down Michigan State. I just don't see this as the sort of trap game where, it's a surprise that Michigan wasn't really focused on this game.
Yeah, I mean, the trap game that means you overlook this team, and there's no way that Michigan is going to overlook Michigan State. I mean, those days are gone, and I think they really haven't overlooked them in the past. But I mean, they lacked in matching Michigan State's intensity for 3 hours in a lot of these losses. Okay. I think those days, that's not going to happen. If Michigan loses to Michigan State, God forbid, this year, it's not going to be from a lack of intensity. It's not going to be from this trap game concept. Things are just going to, on the field that are, whether it be turnovers or whatever, or execution, miraculous execution by Michigan State, by less talented players than it happens. But no, it's not a trap game. The trap game to me is easy. The trap game to me is Maryland, but the trap game is only a trap game, and that's that's the 11th game.
Mm-hmm.
That's a trap game if Michigan beats Penn State. Okay, then it's a trap game. If Michigan loses to Penn State, Maryland's no longer a trap game. Maryland is a redemption game. Maryland is we got to get our act together. We're still in this thing. A lot of football to be played mentality. So that there's only one trap game. I mean, the fearful trap game in my mind, and it's a big fear to me, is the Maryland game, because it's sandwiched between Penn State on the road, Ohio State in Ann Arbor, which will be a tough game. I don't care where they play that game. That's going to be a tough game for Michigan. I think they can win it, but that's the trap game, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. And I don't know if I would call either of these trap games, but I'll tell you what, they are the two I'm thinking of are games where you cannot have that little letdown for a week in the Big Ten. A would be Nebraska, where you have played just cliffhanger games, even when it looked like Michigan was much better, and Minnesota, where they're getting things going a little bit up in Minneapolis again, and I just those two back to back. If you have a little emotional slip up after tearing through your non-conference schedule, I still think those are games where Michigan gets to prove how really focused it is. They're talking national championship or bust, a lot of these guys, but to be that kind of team, to perform and not have the slip up that's going to cost you potentially that spot in the playoff, in the national championship, you have to get games like at Nebraska and at Minnesota right.
That's a really interesting point about those two games, and I'm going to agree with you on this in this regard, because I don't think that I think Michigan will. The Nebraska game in Lincoln, you got Matt Rhule, you got a new coach. I think they'll be right. It's the first road game, okay? And you remember the first road game last year, Michigan was pretty good. They went to Iowa City, which is a tougher challenge last year at that game, I think, than this game.
Mm-hmm.
But going to Lincoln that's a tough place. I mean, and we remember that night game a couple years ago. That was a root canal. Okay. Yeah. So that could be, but I think they'll be ready for Nebraska. But you're right about the Minnesota game, though. Right after that, they're back on the road again. That's a good one. That's a good one, John, pointing that out, that Minnesota game, as far as a trap game.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a game that's like, wow, when they bury Minnesota, hey, Michigan's for real. I still go back to my creed that we're not going to really know how really, really good they are until they beat Penn State on November 11th. But you got to avoid blowing up the season with a loss in Minnesota, and that's a good point. That's an interesting one up in Minneapolis on the 7th of October.